Let's go ahead and kick this off. First of all, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. We appreciate you joining us. My name is Ash, and I will be introducing our wonderful panelists in just a minute here. I want to welcome you to another installment of the Traxo Office Hour series. Today, we're going to be covering the topic of risk and how it can be a benefit to manage travel programs. Our expert panel is going to uncover the state of affairs as it relates to travel risk management. And we're going to emphasize a little bit about how travel managers can understand the complexities of risk to ensure the long-term viability of managed travel. We all know that the travel industry is tilting forward, so we're looking towards decentralization of some of the traditional pillars of managed travel and how today's travel managers can navigate this complex maze. Some of the topics we're going to talk about is going to be ISO 31030 and how it impacts managed travel. We're going to discuss some of the top risk priorities in 2024, identify sources that are going to disrupt travel, and of course, talk to you about developing risk strategies to protect the future of managed travel. So a couple of housekeeping things. We are going to be recording today's session, and we're going to make this available to you all to share with your colleagues or just listen to the session again, and that will be available in the Traxo Resource Center. Also, the Q&A feature is open. So if you have any questions for our panelists today, feel free to type them into the Q&A feature that you see there. We'll be monitoring that and addressing your questions throughout the webinar. So without any further ado, let's get started. And I'm very privileged to introduce our very, very esteemed and handsome panelists today. So Todd Shingleton, he's the Vice President of Security at Wabtec Corporation. We also have Nick Hawkins, Head of Sales and Marketing at Global Secure Accreditation, known as GSA. And of course, my name is Ash, Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at Traxo. So I want to kick it off by giving you all a little bit of an overview about Wabtec. So Todd, if you don't mind, let's introduce Wabtec Corporation to those who may not have heard the name before.
Great. Thanks, Ash. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone here this afternoon. Wabtec, it may not be a common name, but it is a Fortune 500 company. We're about $8 billion in sales. And as you can see here, we've been around for a while. We were George Westinghouse's very first company, and it was among his first inventions. He later on moved down the street to a neighboring town and started Westinghouse Electric, which we were never affiliated with. But we've grown substantially, really, in the last 20 years. I've been with the company for 35 years now. My hair was not this color when I started, and we've had a great success. Honestly, I think there were 14 sites when we started. I have over 200 sites now globally. So it's a growing company. It's very exciting, and with that comes a lot of traveling, and that's why it brings me to this seat right now. Thank you.
Wonderful. You did not mention the relationship between Wabtec Corporation and the NASA Artemis mission. So I'm going to bring that up because when I saw that, I was really, really excited. I'm super excited about space travel. So for me, connecting NASA to Wabtec was amazing. No comment on that one, huh?
Well, no, because my mind has been set on anything on rails. So if we're going to build a rail to the moon, I'd probably be. It's that's something kind of recent, and it's very exciting. But that just kind of goes to show what we've been done. We are a technology-based company, and for old standard in rail, you think of coal and you think all those kinds of things, but we're in many things. We're in drones. We put turbochargers on cruise ships. And it's a very diverse company, which makes it very investable for people because we are essentially diverse. So
very good. Well, thank you for that. Let's move on to our next panelist. So Nick, let's give everybody an intro to GSA and insights into ISO 31030.
Thanks, Ash, and good to be here with you and your guest today. So very briefly, as Ash mentioned, I run sales and marketing globally for GSA Group. GSA Group fundamentally is a security organization, looks at fundamentally the security pillars posed by an individual and the threats insider threats, basically around those pillars of physical security, cyber security, and overall security risks. And the four pillars of our organization are, as you see here, we are a global organization. Fundamentally, we came out of the Metropolitan Police in London, the UK, but also a lot of military personnel we employ for many different areas around the globe. The area I'm going to concentrate on today, which is around travel risk and safety, is GSA accreditation, which will bring us on to the new standard, the travel risk management standard. So if I can have the next slide. So as I mentioned, GSA accreditation was founded back in 2018, and it was founded as a result of the requirement following all the attacks around the world, whether it be Mumbai, Sri Lanka, and other places, Tunisia, in some of the hotels, and the requirement actually for independent security undertaken in the hotel industry, in the accommodation industry. So we developed an independent accreditation for hotel security accreditation, but then that's moved into working on travel risk management with the development of this new ISO 31030 standard, which has been developed over the last few years, and we've been heavily involved in that. And what's really interesting, and I put this comment in from a global financial services travel manager, because I believe a lot of your clients today, Ash, the people joining your call, are travel managers. And this is a US-based global financial services. And actually, the security of our travelers is an ongoing priority. And I think that's something that we're seeing over the last few years with a number of issues and incidents and risks that are being identified around the world. So I'm now going to move into ISO 31030. I'm going to take this at 35,000 feet. And some of you may have heard of this. It was actually launched at the end of 2021. ISO, although is seen very much as a European and probably non-US standard, it is actually a global standard. So it is recognized around the world. There's 82 standards bodies, and some of those are from the US. I know a lot of the people on this call are from the US. So it is a truly global standard. It is the first of its type. It's been worked on for many years. There's going to be some others coming out off the back of this, but I'll come on to that. I think the key to this is the guidance is intended for those managing and participating in organizational travel. That's the key here. It is a benchmark standard. And what this standard does, it actually permits travel management professionals to interpret and adopt the guidance proportionately and pragmatically. And I think that's a key word within the context of their own business sector. So there's no one message, one answer for any organization. And also not only within their own business sector, but also within their own organizational need. So I think those are the two key things here. I think the other thing that we've seen is the integration of travel risk management with the overall risk management appetite of the organization, the corporates. Now, one of the things is some organizations might not have risk managers. They may not have travel risk managers, but we can come on to that later. So it really is the key of this travel risk management benchmark standard is to integrate this within your existing broader risk management structure. Fundamentally, it is the duty of care towards your traveler. As I mentioned earlier, the security and duty of care towards the traveler is an ever-growing concern for a lot of organizations. Okay, next slide, please.
So I want to ask a question to Todd, Nick, if you don't mind, on this topic, because I think it's important that we understand things from Todd's perspective. So question for you, Todd, what role does ISO 31030 play at Wabtec, if any?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, without going too long here, I think a lot of companies, in my experience, they put ISO out as sort of the destination. They want to get accredited. It was ISO. So they followed ISO they wanted ISO to be the destination. In this case, the 31030, in my mind, is just a roadmap to that destination. It helps you kind of form where do we want to go. And to me, it's all the destination is just reducing risk to acceptable levels. And that's what safety is. That's what I think proper risk is. You're never going to say, we have a safe company, we have a safe travel plan. You can only try to reduce those risks to acceptable levels. And that's where Traxo comes in and a lot of programs surrounding it that are part of the 31030. But again, it's a tool. It's not the destination. The destination is reducing risk.
Great. And Nick, one of the things I recently attended a webinar and they talked about ISO 31030, but they also introduced that from a sector's perspective. So in that study that they did, manufacturing showed that they had a adoption of ISO at 96% levels, right? So that's the number in that study. But then energy showed 59%. So to me, it kind of is obvious that depending on what industry you're in, your acceptance of ISO 31030 can be different. Do you have any thoughts on why does that play a role? Is it just about risk being risk averse?
I think it's absolutely, it's the risk maturity of an organization. There's a lot of organizations that don't adopt risk management in their organizations for whatever reason. I'll pick up Todd's point because I think it's a very valid point. It's not the destination, it's a benchmark. And I think it's something that people can look at. It's a guidance. It's good practice, whatever, however you want to flavor that. But it gives some it's best practice from the industry. It was developed from specialists around the world. We were part of that, but there were hundreds of people, both the industry, corporates, industry, suppliers, everything were involved in that. Before that, there was no benchmark for people to go, well, how does my my travel risk management look? And that's all it is. And I think people are using it to be able to benchmark their own internal travel risk management processes.
Okay, great. All right, back to you.
Yeah. So, I think, and again, I'll pick up Todd's comment, which is it's all about reducing risk. And actually, one of the areas is obviously risk reduction and crisis management. And actually making sure and I think Todd mentioned it as well, most organizations, it's going to happen to you. You just need to make sure you're in the right place, that if it does happen to you, you've got the right processes and procedures in place to be able to manage it. Whether it be security threats, as we can see above there, we'll come on to some of the big risks. Cybercrime is a bigger area. Crime, terrorism is not going away, and particularly around around travel. Yeah. Some of the safety hazards, some of these areas aren't going away as well. Whichever way you look at it, and I think anyone who's involved with travel today can see these on a pretty well a daily basis somewhere in the world. All of these activities are going on.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly that because I feel like now more than ever, these topics are just an everyday topic now, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's definitely a serious scenarios that we're in here.
Yeah. So I guess, before I sort of get to this, and one of the areas is, what do people need to think about? And I guess, it's things like pre-travel, during travel, after travel. Has the traveler, received appropriate staff training? Are they fit to travel? Have they received, have they followed the correct booking and appropriate travel process? Have the correct risks been identified for a trip? And there's a lot of organizations that don't go through this process. Have they received a full security brief, depending on where they're going? So these are just some of the areas of some of the benefits of where actually the standard, the benchmark, call it whatever you want, okay, by being aligned more to the actual standard, you can see some of the benefits. And in reality, it makes for a better trip. And actually, coming back to Todd's comment, it reduces the risks for you as an organization. And hopefully, as a result of that, we'll make it more productive and a more successful business travel due to fewer incidents. And if you do have an incident, hopefully you're prepared to deal with it accordingly. Okay. As I say, if an incident happens, you'll be prepared. with your travel risk company, whatever that might be. And I think the other key thing, and we are seeing this a lot with the clients that we work with, it signals to your internal clients, your employees, your workers, that you take their duty of care seriously. And actually sending them off, and there's many stories of where people, and one of the after travel, probably things that we see, and I'll mention in a moment, is the feedback from travelers about their trips. And actually, that's probably one of the positive things that's spoken about within the standard, about the actual feedback from travelers post travel. Yeah, one of the other areas, and it's interesting. So this standard, this benchmark, is not a certifiable standard. So I just want to make that clear. Okay, so it's not one of those. So for any of you in the IT security world, things like ISO 27001. That's certifiable. Okay, this is not. This is a benchmark. But interesting enough, we ran an event with an American legal firm and a French legal firm and a UK legal firm, and because there is now a standard out there, this will be used in courts of law around the world, particularly in those jurisdictions, if an incident happens with a traveller. And it was interesting. We had the French law firm on, and they said, under French law, if you employ French people or you have office in France and you have an incident and you have not complied with this, we will throw the book at you, which I thought was quite interesting. That's French law. So obviously from reducing illegal exposure of executives, that's quite a key area. Yeah. One of the other areas to finish off with, there is talk about actually pushing this not only from a corporate's perspective, but actually from a supplier's. So from a travel perspective, so all of your suppliers, whether it be airlines, ground transport, accommodation, there's talk about another standard, 31032, potentially would cover them. They would have to undertake that to comply. And that's in an embryonic stage at this stage. But it's interesting that there's potentially some focus in that area. So just finally, just to really say, one of the areas, as I mentioned, if we would go to the next slide. So sorry, it's not the next. So this is to give, sorry, just go back one. So this slide just gives you an idea of the areas of the standard. I'm not going to spend much time on it. So the number of elements is the number of questions that cover the different areas of the 31030 standard. So it is an all-inclusive standard that does cover all areas of the business. It's not security or travel, which is why we are seeing very much that the integration of different areas of businesses, corporates, coming together, whether it be HR, legal, IT, travel, risks, security, and everything else, because this is basically a holistic solution. So we can move to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of 31030 readiness assessments to corporates, and I showed some of the clients, global clients, earlier in the slide deck. These are some of the observations that we have seen, probably the major observations we've seen out of some of those assessments we've done with those global organizations. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of them actually trying to achieve internal coordination across the different departments and divisions when it comes around to travel risk has been a challenge for a lot of organizations. One of the big areas is handling personal data. And how do you handle that data in a way that's professional, and the rules of obviously privacy towards the individual. Another area, a lot of people go traveling for weeks. How do you cover from a travel risk perspective the blended travel stroke leisure? And again, different organizations deal with it in different ways. But that's definitely an area that we're seeing a lot of organizations say, well, we don't know how to deal with that. Okay. Another area is the whole training of staff and briefing ahead of trips and actually post trips, as I mentioned earlier. Okay. Due diligence around accommodation, safety and security. A lot of organizations push this down on their TMCs. It's very clear in the standard that actually independent due diligence or your own due diligence should be taken on the properties that you send your people to. It's not good enough that actually the properties you send your people to actually tick their own homework and tell you they are safe and secure. And as I mentioned earlier, the last one is actually gaining traveller feedback, because if you're going to change anything, that gives you a host of information and intelligence of what is working, what isn't working, actually within your own program. So
Well,
hopefully that gives you a flavour.
Yeah, and I'm going to add, from a traveler feedback perspective, that there's also a trust factor, right? So if I'm an employee, and I'm going to talk about number two here, handling personal data. If I'm going to tell you everything about me, I mean, people are very, very sensitive to telling employers about their medical backgrounds and things like that, right? But you can't do risk without knowing those things well, especially personal risk. So from that perspective, I think that having trust in the process, whether it be the gaining the data points or believing in the fact that the employer is going to use the data in the right way to assist the traveler, I think is really, really key. Like they have to trust the process.
Absolutely. And some of them use third-party platforms to host that data that actually HR never get to see it. Some of them actually put the onus on the traveler to sign off that they're fit medically to be able to travel.
Yeah. So
but they have to undertake some due diligence.
Yeah. So we have a question here, Nick. Somebody's
Yeah.
asking us, how do we apply 31030 to events like the recent hotel explosion? How do we meet our duty of care for an event like that? It's a pretty complicated question.
Yeah, I mean, great question. It's not a one-off situation. What it covers, and I talked here about sort of due diligence around accommodation. The question I would ask the individual who asked that is, what due diligence do you undertake on the properties you're sending your people to? Now, a lot of them will say, well, we do an RFP and we send out questions and it's a tick box exercise. That actually doesn't meet the standard today.
Yeah, and I know that GSA does a lot of work on that topic, and you guys are working towards doing those kind of things with your other services. So I think this is a good question.
Yeah, but at the same time, some organizations, the big organizations, have the ability because they've got people in country that go around and check hotels and properties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what due diligence are you undertaking on the properties you send your people to?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that. So we want to shift gears a little bit and kind of give you all a little bit of a top 10 risks in 2024 list. We're not going to go into every one of these topics here. This is for your reference and for your understanding, but I'll pose a couple of questions to our panelists here. So Todd, what stands out to you on this list when you see this? And this is a macro view of risk. We're not talking specifically travel risk management right now, but we're looking at risk from a big picture perspective.
Well, cyber threats. We had a cyber attack last summer, and so that's still big on our list. And the other threat that we would have is incoming goods from third parties across the border, and some of those could contain weapons of mass destruction, any kinds of things like that. So we take a very close look at that. We, Wabtec, are part of what's called CT-PAT. It's a custom sort of TSA, fast lane. And I think because if you're in a fast lane, bad guys want to target it. And so we put a major emphasis on that too as part of the partnership with the federal government. But I guess specifically, probably not a climate change. I really think that terroristic acts is for us because we're people movers. That's what we do. And where there's people, sadly, there's bad people out there that want to hurt them. So whether it be by train or bullet trains, everything we're associated with. To me, I think there's a lot of exposure there going forward. I think it's easier to do something to a railroad than it is, to a plane. And sadly, you can impact just as many people. So those are my concerns.
Okay. Nick, for you, which ones do you think have the highest risk to a company?
Well, I
Putting
think
you in
it
the spot
depends
there a
on,
little bit.
it depends on the organization,
Mhm.
whether you're manufacturing, whatever that might be. I think what I'd like to bring out here, and a lot of your people on the call today will probably know of BCD Travel. And BCD Travel's Global Crisis Management Team identified a number of risks for travel this year. And they cover a lot of these. One of them is climate change. One is cybersecurity. One is geopolitics. That includes terrorism, health. And it's interesting, COVID-19 variants. Are we going to see that as a pandemic still bubble up and the impact of that? Polarized politics and the cost as a result of the cost of living crisis, rising crime around the world. I think it really comes down to the type of organization you're in, um, your supply chain, the impact of that, because I'm quite sure the people who are dependent on some of the supply chains around the world, with the Middle East issues, with what's happening in Ukraine, Russia, and everything else, is have massive issues.
Yeah. So kind of all the above, it sounds like from what you just said.
To be honest, I think you probably have people on this call who probably can relate to all of those.
Yeah.
And actually getting hold of good people.
Yeah. All right. So that was the macro view. Now we're going to get into the micro of factors that are impacting travel risk management. Of course, everybody on this call, when you see this list, you kind of feel like, yes, you do have a pretty good handle. But I want to turn this over to you, Todd, and talk to us a little bit about what risk at Wabtec looked like before the pandemic and how it evolved because of the pandemic.
Yeah, well, in my role for about 30 of those years, it was in safety and security. But as we grew bigger, uh, they came to me and said, "Hey, we want to bifurcate this position and put more emphasis on travel and security, and we'll give you the option." And I thought, I've paid my dues. I think we had a great success record in safety. I think travel and premises security and people security would be huge for me, and that's what I did. At that time, we had just entered COVID, so obviously everybody knows what happened there. Where your emphasis was, but then out of that, I began to look. We have really no idea where people are going. Our travel management company was um, lacking. Let's put it that way. And then it got worse because they lost people. And when we began to come out of COVID and, airline restrictions were lifted and so on, we just had people going everywhere. We did not have a clue where they were going. And it just so happens working with our travel guy, he said, "Hey, you ever hear of this Traxo thing?" And I said, "No." And we began to talk, and I thought, wait a minute, I love it, because now no matter where they book, they're going to get information funneled through this conduit that we set up with International SOS, probably know of them. And then our pre-trip itineraries automatically went to those people, no matter what booking agency that they went through, even directly online. So that was a big challenge, and that's where Traxo had met our needs.
Great. And we appreciate that comment. And then from you talked about the gap, you talked about the actions that you took. What benefits do you see coming from that? With your hat off, Vice President of Security, what are you seeing from your perspective?
Yeah, what I learned was that when I was doing safety, no one ever woke up in the morning and said, "I think I'll go to work today and get hurt." And but what I had also found out is there are people that wake up in the morning and say, "I think I'll go to the workplace and hurt someone," or "I think I'm going to find this American that's traveling over here and hurt them," or do something like we just talked about, the hotel. That is a whole new challenge, and it's kind of alarming. The you can well, I want to back up just for a second about one of the things we found out was we didn't track near misses. And that we do that in the walls of the factory, right? Everybody here, near misses. But there's a lot of near misses that take places in travel. And to set up a mechanism by which you can begin to track those is really critical, because by looking at them, you can then set up some preventative measures to prevent the accident from happening at all. So that, to me, no matter where you work, I doubt if there are, it'd be interesting to know, but there probably aren't many companies tracking near misses from business travelers. That's the second thing. So we're working on that one. And then thirdly, just really for this group, what I realized is no matter what your job is, we have one thing in common. We have one function, and that is we are money managers. We have to protect profits, and you protect profits by protecting people and premises and products. And when we do that, we make the company profitable. And no matter where you are in a cultural sphere, about social responsibilities and so on, you'll never do any of that. You'll never get any of these protective measures put in unless you make a profit. So protecting people when they travel, or even within the walls of our building, are critical, and you all play a role in that. You should team up with people in EHS and security to pull off that heavy lift.
Perfect. Nick, anything stand out to you on this list here?
I want to pick up on Todd's comments, because I think, unless you prepare with crisis management planning and training, you're leaving yourself very open. And I would say a lot of organizations we work with look at doing it, but probably don't do it as well as they should do.
Perfect. And we have a question here. And by the way, any of you on the call today, if you have questions, please type them into the question and answer box there. And we're going to go ahead and take them as we go along in today's session. So a question that came in, I think you answered this, but I'll repeat the question here. It says, Todd, how did you get the direct online bookings over to ISOS?
They developed an API from well, I assume everybody here knows how Traxos works, Ash.
Yeah, we'll have to take that as a second webinar later on, maybe.
Okay, well, but that's what we did. We were able to determine all of the itineraries coming in using a Wabtec email, and then funneled those to International SOS. And then from that, International SOS saw where they were going, sent pre-trip advisories, cautions, things like that directly back to that employee.
Perfect. And the company that helped you do that is?
Well, in Traxo and International SOS.
Great. Awesome. Okay. All right. Another quick question here. Does your program allow for rideshare, Uber, Lyft? Todd, this is for you.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then we are capturing Uber and Lyft rides for Wabtec Traxos, and then we're sharing that out as needed. So great question, and thank you for asking that question. All right, let's move on to a study that was done very recently, actually just this past week by GBTA. And the study is called the Travel Risk Management in a Post-COVID World. And I bring this up because, excuse me, I bring this up because travel programs don't typically own travel risk management. And so what the study was talking about is what internal departments at your company have primary oversight over travel risk management. As you can see from the results, a large percentage of this was handled by the security risk teams. The travel department came in second, HR third, and so forth and so on. But you see almost a doubling effect here between who owns travel risk management. And a lot of times in travel, we talk about risk. We talk about risk from the perspective of, yes, we should do something, but very rarely do people go beyond that. And I think that it kind of comes into the question of, well, who owns it, right? Who owns the risk? And so from the results here, you can see that a large percentage of the risk is owned by these teams. But then it kind of takes us to the second part of the question is that who, what does size matter, right? Does the size of an organization matter? Does it matter how big you are from an ownership perspective? And so the next part of the study talks a little bit about the different sizes. So you can see the orange is 5,000 less employees, 5 to 20,000 for large corporations is blue, and then the yellow one is the 20,000 and above. So focus here on the fact that we have the travel department and we have the security risk team department. So you can see, if we just look at the orange bars here between these two boxes, that if the organization is small, 5,000 and less, then you see that travel departments own that 41% of the time versus security and risk that owns it 36% of the time. But then you shift gears to the large corporations, the blue lines here, and then the yellow ones, then you see a substantial decrease around who owns it. Very quickly, we move from the travel department owning risk to the security and risk department owning risk. And the numbers are just extravagant from a difference perspective. So I share this because I think it's important to understand within your own company, number one, how large are you? Where does risk reside, and where should risk reside, and where should you take action? And so I'm going to ask the question to you, Todd, because I think that it's important that if you're a travel manager today and you are talking about risk, or you are thinking about risk within your organization, how should a travel manager approach the head of risk?
Well, I think you come at them the way I mentioned, and that we're here to reduce costs, or to protect costs, or cost avoidance. And if I think everyone on this line is from the U.S., we all have one thing in common, that if somebody's injured outside the workplace, but their workplace is traveling, it's compensable. There's workers' compensation costs involved there, and medical costs. So that is one thing in common that you get with a risk manager. And I got to tell you, I did that role. And people traveling, it was well, it was an oh-so do. I had to, focus on the people within the four walls. But you began to sort of study this, and you see a guy that slips and falls, who's got a leg injury or a car accident, those kinds of things. He was staying in a cheap hotel, and something happened there, whatever it might be. There was really no control. So that was a segment that Wabtec decided we want to build on and build up. And so to me, it doesn't matter where our listeners are in any one of those categories. It's the same, whether you're a retail store with 6 people in it, or whether you're a conglomerate with 6,000, in our case, 30,000 employees, it still remains the same. Get with the people that oversee a risk and protection of people, and partner up. And you'll be surprised what the two of you can do.
All right. So if and this, I think the question is answered in this graph here from the study from GBTA, but from the perspective of, if a company does not have a risk department, what should they do? I mean, does it just fall on travel to kind of handle it, Nick, Todd, or is there something else that is not listed here that we should be thinking about?
I mean, Todd, I don't know if you want to answer that, or I can.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
From our experience, there's a lot of organizations that don't have a risk department. They may have security. So it sort of gets, and I can think of a US organization we've worked with where travel risk suddenly got thrown into security. And I don't know if, Todd, you can relate to that. It was like, well, who else can we throw travel risk at? It's an issue. We need to deal with it. Oh, security. They don't have risk management. So it's historically, but I would say one of the things we've seen out of all of this is the integration of travel, security, risk, as well as HR and the legal department, because actually they're all interested when an incident happens. So actually they've got some interest to make sure it works correctly.
Perfect. Yeah. Todd, did you want to add to that?
No, I think HR, there are people, no matter who they, if it's people oriented, yeah. I would say human resources is a common ground there. But what we should do is, even though you might, don't waive your right to lead people. Let's say, well, that's our insurance company's role, or that's our TMC's role, or whatever. You grab the bull by the horns and get with the people that in your organization. They may wear different hats. You know who they are. You know who the people that are there to try to protect profits and risk, and just align with them. That's my advice to you.
That's,
If
I think, a great piece of advice.
if
Nick?
I can pick up
Yeah,
on that, 4 years ago, I remember going into corporates around the world, and literally travel and security, stroke risk, never talk to each other.
that's right.
It just, I mean, they may pass each other. Now that I think there's been a huge swing, exactly to Todd's comment, where there is an interest now to work together, and bring those other people within the industry with you. And I think also we're seeing a lot more organizations buy into this, and you need to get buy-in from your senior management level. It's the business need to buy into this because they have an interest in their people as well.
Yeah, and the common theme I'm hearing from Todd and you is that, take care of your people, right? And when I hear take care of your people, I think of human resources. But yet when I see the numbers here, human resources is nowhere close to wanting to take on travel risk, where to me I think it's a fit. But anyway, we're not going to solve that on this call. We're just wanted to make
I
that note.
guess
My answer there
Yeah,
is people here, they know their staff, they know their colleagues, and they knew who that sort of people first person is, no matter what hat they're wearing. Go to them, and then that ripple effect will start going through the organization.
great point.
That
All right.
it might be the CEO. If the CEO is really business oriented and he just just wants to drive a profit, well then speak his language. If it's profit, talk language. If it's a human emotional side of thing and somebody in HR is like that, speak their language. Know the audience that you're talking to and speak their language. If it's profit or people, talk each.
Perfect. All right. Let's move forward here and talk about some of the threats that are happening in the travel industry that we feel are going to disrupt managed travel as we know it. So for those of you in travel, you've kind of seen all of this. We just attempted here to put a list together that gives you a little bit of a high level overview of what's happening in travel, of course. And you can probably relate to some of these topics that we're going to just quickly mention here. So obviously, as we see, there's definitely a deconstruction of the traditional travel distribution channels that are out there today. And again, we're not going to go into a lot of detail, just simply list them and give you something to think about. We're seeing a lot of content disparities occurring already between the GDS channel and the direct booking channels. So content disparity, of course, gets travelers to go outside of your travel program and your managed travel program. Of course, this is all due to the lack of advancement from corporate booking tools. Corporate booking tools have kind of been stale for quite a while the consumer technologies have kind of driven travelers towards them and really focused on that. And then we see that the lowest logical fare concept has a reduced value in companies as we move forward, simply for a lot of reasons. Probably content disparity and is a major reason for that. The airlines, of course, are making huge strides on NDC investment advancements, and we see a lot of airlines moving away from the channels that we have known in managed travel and really rely on them to help support our programs. And then BTN came out with this huge book around retailing revolution. And of course, if you haven't read that, please do read that. Our friends at Amtrav kind of have been managing what American Airlines did back on April 3rd when they launched this disparity. And as you can see here from the volatility of fares, and this is just American Airlines here, you see a consistent roughly $110 discrepancy between what people find within the NDC category and the direct category versus the non-NDC or the corporate booking tools and the GDS. And of course, volatility of $100 plus is not a small number. Travelers notice it, and then they, of course, are going to shift gears and change the way they book travel. So we're presenting all of this to you because we want to make sure that you have a little bit of a viewpoint of what's happening around there. It's not just 1 point or 2 points. It's really all of these items coming together at the same time and really creating a huge a shift in the marketplace and a huge shift in everybody's managed travel program. So we want nothing more than managed travel programs to stay strong because we really think that they're really a vehicle for companies to understand where travelers are, how they're booking, what they're doing. And of course, it's a great way to help manage costs. But at the same time, we cannot ignore the shifts that are occurring in the marketplace. So Todd and Nick, which one of these stands out to you? And how can a company manage travel when compliance breaks?
Go ahead, Nick.
I would look at lack of advancement from corporate booking tools. And again, from experience, one of the things that we hear more and more is organizations where the booking tools don't move with times and everything else, and there are challenges. Employees take their own sort of rules in hand, and they go off and do their own thing, which obviously cause problems around travel risk, policies, procedures, and everything else within an organization. So I'd probably see that as the major one that comes out. And one of the frustrations, which obviously having something like the Traxo tool, as I referred it to a client I think it was in France, they saw that very much met their requirements. So, Todd.
Yeah, to me, I think a big is you could do advancements and lack of advancements too with booking tools, because I really think that AI is going to be the TMC of the future.
Well, there you go. You've said the letter AI now in this webinar. I was hoping we would get through it without somebody mentioning AI, but here we go. Go ahead.
Oh, folks, that wasn't planned. That's Osh and I. We're always on the, you know. But I think you could be at an airport and if be a flight delayed, you grab your device, you just tell it what's going on, and you're going to get like instantaneously, here are your options. You're at this airport, and you just like plug and play, and it's doing all the work that you would normally do, picking up the phone, calling back your travel management and say, I need a flight. I'm stuck in Chicago. I got to get to Denver. And, you know, and it's kind of long and drawn out. We used to think it was pretty speedy, but now I really think that it's a danger, I think, for AI is to travel management companies.
All right, we have a question here from the audience. I think this question is for you, Todd. Oh, this is a good question. If you're approaching travel risk management with a blank slate, all right, as the CEO, what are the top 3 priorities that you would direct your team on for the highest impact in 2024? Interesting question, a little complex there. So 3 priorities that you would direct your team on for the highest impact in 2024.
Boy, it's easy just to say, you know, best cost, best risk, best alternatives, right? Sounds great, but make that happen, right? It could be a combination of all 3, but yeah, I mean, we don't want to send people into Ed's beds for a $14.95 a night stay because it's cheapest. There's got to be an element of protection and comfort. People are you know, out, you know, at risk and away from homes, that kind of a thing. So I really think it's a blend. You've got to you have to protect the bottom line, and I think there's got to be oversight too. I think too many people sometimes just pencil whip expense reports, and they're not looking to see where somebody goes or how they're getting there. They're just looking at overall costs and signing it. And the challenge would be that if I was a CEO, to tell the organization, you need, this is responsible. Your group is spending money. You know, we spend millions of dollars a year in travel, and it's a big cost. And we need to look at that from the operating side and saying, if we're at, you know, 10% EBIT, let's throw it that way, and so and we have $1 million cost on our books, how many trains does that make? We're making 100,000 per train. Do the math. How many trains are going to sell just to pay for these expenses? And you do it that way. If people just turn in wrenches and make it communicate on their level, I repeat myself with that. But I think it's a blend. If I'm CEO, I'll do the same thing. I talked about talking up to people and speaking their language. I think if I'm CEO, I talk down to what's important to them. That is, if it's HR, I'm talking about people. If it's, you know, finance, you know, I'm talking to travel management people and others. But here's the thing, I'll say it this way. It's football playoff season, and no 2 players kind of do the same thing. There's 11 people out there. Some are blocking, some are tackling, some are running, some are throwing, but they do something unique that from a collective standpoint makes them successful. And if individuals don't perform at an individual level, then the team loses. So that's my point. Get everybody performing at what their unique talent is at their best, and you'll have success.
All right, Nick, that was an analogy of NFL, which is American football.
Thank you.
So
Well, I'm pleased to say one of our famous rugby players has just come over. A Welshman has just come over and joined your development squad. So
oh, very nice. Hopefully
yeah,
he
he
makes it to the
literally
big time.
big news over here.
All right. All right. So finally, we're gonna close out with this. So these are some of the risk strategies that we think can help you protect managed travel. Of course, we want to make sure that managed travel stays intact. We don't want risk to impact that or the other disruption items that we mentioned earlier. So real quickly, get involved in risk. Don't say, and I think we heard that from Todd and Nick, that don't push it to somebody else. Actively meet and talk to the head of risk. So don't be afraid to pick up the phone and say, hey, we need to have a discussion on travel. Of course, deploy a technology solution. There's a lot of solutions out there. We mentioned International SOS, but we have Crisis 24, Helix, Anvil, just to name a few. I think going beyond travel, work from home personnel, right? So a lot of times risk, we think about travel all the time, but it's important that we don't only think about travel. We should always consider our assets that are not traveling, that might be working remotely in a different location. And a lot of times I hear from travel managers that, oh, it's international travel. We don't do a lot of international travel. So risk is not only for international travel. And I think our panelists will agree with that comment. And then lastly, which is probably the most important thing for me and from my perspective is, win the hearts of your employees through risk. Nothing is more valuable than the employee feeling good about the organization that they work at, what they do. And of course, this is very closely related to things like talent retention and other areas that we're all very, that we find to be really, really important. So, so Todd, last comments from you on the strategies. Anything that you want to add to this?
I don't. I think for me personally, this exceeded my expectations. This was a great call. I'm T. Shingleton at Wabtec.com. Somebody wants to shoot me an email with that follow-up questions, be happy to talk to you. We're all on that same team.
Wonderful. Nick, from your side?
I think absolutely. Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this. It's been fascinating. I think the key is the whole industry's moved forward. I think there's buy-in across the business to move down this road around managed travel and the importance actually from an employee and duty of care. And actually the employees care. They do care.
Yep, perfect. Wonderful. So thank you both for that. And again, Nick, Todd, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you sharing your invaluable insight with our audience today. And of course, we look forward to having you all be part of our sessions in the future as well. So I want to thank everybody on this call for personally attending today's webinar, especially those that have contributed with some nice questions. We really do appreciate those questions. I believe everyone can agree there's a high probability for supplier direct bookings to take place for most companies, and that's where Traxo can be of help. So we do have the ability to capture real-time bookings, cancellations, and changes, regardless of source, which means that you have full visibility into all your travel data. And of course, that is really important from a duty of care and risk perspective. If you're curious to learn about Traxo, please let us know. We're more than happy to connect with you and talk to you. Thank you all for coming today. We really do appreciate you being here and look forward to seeing you on our next Office Hours webinar. Have a wonderful day.